Hey, Wealth Warriors, Jackie Elmer here, and thank you for joining me for today's training overview, coaching overview, and just some insights into assisting you in closing out the year 2019 and an entire decade. That's right, we are closing out an entire decade. So thanks also to those of you who are catching this on the replay, because we've got a whole year to work toward getting this right, so it doesn't really matter when you are watching this. All right, so a couple things that I want to go through. I'm going to go through a lot of information here. We're going to talk about how to close out the year, and then we'll talk about closing out the decade and the process that I have gone through. Honestly, for the last 20 years, I have gone through this process. This is the first time, however, that I actually looked back on the entire decade to kind of see what happened and get a feel for a whole overview of the decade. So the first thing that I really want to encourage you to do is reflect on the year. We'll talk about the year first. Reflect on the year and then do what I've been talking about. If you've been following me at all, you know that I talk about my thought download. So just go in and do a thought download on everything that comes up for you in the year. Here is how I do my reflection on the year. I have my journal. Okay, so I journal. I have my thought download book, which, by the way, for this next year, I'm going to combine the two. I've been keeping them separate, but I think I'm going to combine them so that I have a better strategy for looking back and seeing not only what was happening for the day, but those things that were on my mind, and it gives me one less thing to cart around with me. So I take my journal and my thought download book, and then I take my day timer, and I literally go through month to month. That's one reason why I'm an old-fashioned calendar girl, because it's harder to do this on an app. But I look through where I filled in everything in January. This is my January month overview where I put all the big stuff, trips, people who visited, important events, speaking gigs, whatever it was that I had. And then I just quickly flip through and look at week to week what I filled in my calendar. And I look through that, and it's always so fun to do that because you forget. It's amazing how much you forget over the course of a year of what you've done, what you've accomplished. So that's how I do that. And then I just really go through month to month and I write out, I pick the top things, the best and the worst, if you will, from each month. Although I'm a really huge believer that no matter what, you've heard me say this before, life and business, but life is 50-50. It really truly is. So 50% of the time we're going to be frustrated, unhappy, slightly not at ease with whatever is going on, whatever we're working on, another person, whatever it is. 50% of the time we're going to be unsettled with whatever it is. And 50% of the time it's going to be great and we can find the good in it and all is wonderful. So when you look back through, it's important because there's the true learning. Most of the learning and growth that we experience comes from the negative 50%. It's great to have the 50% where we're happy and we're thriving and we feel like everything is great and groovy. That 50% is easy, but it's the time that we invest in that 50% where we're frustrated, we're unsettled, we're unhappy, we're angry, whatever the emotion, the feeling is that we feel toward that, that's where we really have the opportunity for growth. Now, Steve Jobs has a great quote that I like to use, and that is, I'm paraphrasing, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You're only able to connect the dots looking backwards. And that's true to some extent, especially if you're not doing really intentional planning with your life and with your business. But what I've learned is that certainly going through, these are my calendars, by the way, these are my day timers for the last decade. What I have learned is if I become intentional and I spend time really focused and planning, I'm able to the best of my ability to begin to connect the dots and be intentional moving forward so that when I do look back, I can see how I set myself up for success. I set myself up for growth, and I set myself up to really accomplish and achieve those things that I truly want. Now, it's interesting. Most people plan more for the weekend ahead or their vacation in 2 months or whatever, those fun recreational things. Most people spend more time planning that than they do planning their life, planning their business, or planning to achieve the goals that they want. And most people don't even really take the time to set goals, set intentions, or any of that type thing. And so that's, one thing that I really want to encourage you to definitely do that. Spend some time today, tomorrow. That's my favorite thing about the week between Christmas and New Year's is that's when I spend my time kind of tidying up, looking back, reflecting. So last week I talked about your focus word, and if you haven't had a chance to see that, you can click on the videos here on Facebook, or you can go to my blog at streetsmartwealth.com. You can watch the video there, or on my podcast on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you listen. I talked about selecting your focus word, and I took you through a process, and my focus word for 2020 is accomplished. Now in 2018, my focus word was systemize. That's because I spent 2017 running myself ragged and doing a lot of networking and marketing and different things. And then I realized I really didn't have systems in place, adequate systems to benefit from what I was doing. So in 2018, I looked back at everything that I had done in 2017 and began to put systems in place so that I knew my follow-up procedures. I knew what step I was taking everybody through in my funnel, whether I met them online, whether I met them offline, to ultimately achieve that goal of selling products and services, signing up coaching clients, whatever it is that the offer was that I was most interested in making to that person. And you'll know what that is for you. Then in 2019, this year, my focus word was mastering practice, because after creating those systems in my business, I was able to look at all the areas of my life, because of course my 5 favorite F words are my buckets of, that's my values, my priorities, and it's my marketing plan as well. I was able to look at those areas and say, what do I need to do in each of these 5 key areas that matter to me to create the practices and master the practice of accomplishing what I want in those areas. So now I'm using that third word for this year, for 2020, accomplishing. So I've got my systems in place, and I've spent the last 2 years tweaking those, and I'll continue to do that in 2020. And then I set out to master the practice in the core areas of my life. And now I'm going to use my focus word of accomplished to make sure that I start the day with the intention of what I need to do in each of those core areas, and more specifically, what I want to do in each of those core areas and what I intend to do, so that I feel accomplished, I am accomplished, and I can check that box at the end of the day. And that's how I can do self-coaching. That's how I can be accountable to know that I'm doing what I want to do to achieve what I want, to achieve that priority goal in each of those areas. So my 5 F's, of course, are faith, family and friends, fun, fitness, and finance. And everything that I do falls under those umbrellas. Those are my core values and the important things, my priorities in life. So you'll have to figure out what those are for you, and certainly borrow mine if those fit. All right, so again, every day at the end of the day, every week, every month, and at the end of next year, I'll be looking back and saying, okay, can I check the box of being accomplished in that area? All right, so now for the next part, I'm put together a worksheet. So if you're not getting my marketing emails, you can go to streetsmartwealth.com/live, L-I-V-E, and I'll be sending out the worksheet that goes with this, so that you can take this and you can spend that time for yourself answering the questions and setting yourself up. So before I get to the questions, just quickly, I mentioned this. These are my calendars. These are my planners. This is how I started the decade. Okay. For some reason, I had 2 in 2010. I think one of them wasn't working for me. And then I bought this, one of these big fat planners. Okay. And so I have 2011, 2012, and then 2013 is still in here. And I decided that was just way too large. It was too clunky. And then I shifted down, and you'll see I spent the next 5 years, and now I've gone back for this year with slender that fits into a backpack, fits into my checked baggage or my carry-on baggage or whatever, and isn't so bulky and doesn't take up space. So I literally went through each one of these over the last week. I dug all these out, I went through them, and then I did my thought download, and I just literally set up, I just wrote the year, and I didn't want to get too involved, but I just wrote the year, and then I picked up to 4 words, or 4 events or 4 phrases that summed up what that year meant to me. And the interesting thing is, just like I mentioned, life is 50-50. So when I looked back on each of these years, 5 of those years were growth years, which meant I was more in the struggle phase and the frustrated phase than the positive, uplifted phase. And 5 of those years, life was groovy, business was booming, and all of that good stuff. But the interesting thing is, back to self-coaching and accountability, what I was also really able to do is look back and say, over the last even 20 years I've had my business online. So over the last 20 years, what were the peak years and what was I doing in those peak years that made them peak years? Because I don't believe in luck. I think we create our own luck. So what was I doing in those peak years that made things work, made things really flow? So as I looked back on that, and I've said this before, the biggest void that I realized that I created for myself and my business is that I really dropped the ball on my marketing. Because what works, works. And the best idea, the best program, the best whatever falls flat if there's not marketing behind it. And we all know that from all kinds of different products and services that never really made it out there that were fantastic, but they didn't have good marketing. So part of my plan for 2020 and making sure that I can check the box of feeling accomplished, especially in the area of finance, which is my business, because honestly, I did a great job in 2019 of really hitting those priorities in my faith, in my family and friends, in my fun, and in my fitness. Those I rocked. And finance, I did okay, but my business didn't end in 2019 the way that I wanted it to. But now I have a very rock solid business plan. I know what I'm doing, and I'm being very, very intentional with my plan, with my calendar, and what I'm creating, so that I know that as I look back again, daily, weekly, monthly, and at the end of the year, I'm going to put all of it on me to create the success that I want in my business so that I can feel accomplished. And marketing's the biggest piece of it. I've got the systems in place, but I just fell flat really over the last 2 years on really following through on a lot of that. And a good part of it was because I've been conflicted. Most of you know that. What am I actually promoting? Do I want to still be a network marketer? Am I more focused on creating coaching programs and working with the masses? What is it that I want to do? And I've really narrowed that down and am much more clear on who I am, who my brand is, who I serve, and how I serve them, which is on the worksheet that you'll be getting if you opt in for that. Okay, so that's what I did. I looked back through and I figured the highlights, the places where I really was gangbusters, the areas that really brought me joy, and where I also still want to focus. So I was able to put all that into my thought download book. And like I said, I'm bringing these together for the next year. And then I'll be doing my thought downloads daily and sometimes twice a day, really honing in on those areas that I really want to focus on or solve a problem toward or whatever. And as I mentioned, the thought download thing has been so huge for me. It's amazing how many things I feel like just take care of themselves by getting them out of my system and venting, even if it's just on paper, as well as looking back and seeing the positive things and where great things have happened. So those are a key part of it. So that's what I've done to close out the decade. And I don't know about you, but I am ready to kick 2019 to the curb. It's been the most amazing year and the most challenging year all at the same time. But again, life is 50-50, and that's the way that it goes. And when you know that going in and you can accept that it's 50-50, it takes you out of feeling so overwhelmed, feeling frustrated with the struggle, and instead taking a deep breath and kind of relaxing into the struggle, into the frustration, into the anger, into the sadness, whatever it is, and asking, you know, what's my lesson in this? What's my growth opportunity in this? And how am I going to take this, move myself forward, move myself into the better person that I know I'm being challenged to become because of this? I don't, like I said, I don't think there's any such thing as luck. I also don't believe that there's any such thing as coincidence, things happen for a reason, even those things that are very painful. And when we can really dial in on what's my lesson here and how am I going to grow from this. You've probably heard me share before, and I got part of this from Byron Katie and part of it from Hal Elrod and different people who I've followed, Abraham Hicks, but Hal Elrod specifically has what he calls his 5-minute rule, and that's, when something happens, it happened, I can't change it, and I'm going to give myself 5 minutes to be emotionally distraught or whatever it is. And that doesn't mean that those feelings don't come back around. It doesn't mean that we shove them under the rug and don't deal with them. That's probably one of the biggest problems that many of us have had, certainly myself, is not dealing with feelings, feeling like, it's that I always need to be working toward and thinking about those positive things. But sometimes we have to stop, and most of the time when we have negative things that happen to us, we want to stop, feel that feeling. But at the same time, it's like Byron Katie says, you can argue with reality and you're going to lose 100% of the time. We can't change the past. We can't change circumstances. We can't change people. We are the only ones who we can control, and we ultimately control our thoughts and feelings around it and the way that we react to it and the growth that we experience because of it. All right, so that's a little bit on that. Now, the questions that'll be in the worksheet, these are the questions that you want to ask yourself, ideally, as you go through and close out the decade, close out the year 2019, and prepare yourself for 2020. The first one is, who do I want to become? Who do I want to become in 2020? And that starts, of course, first with your goals and intentions. What are you planning? I've set my number one priority in each one of my 5 buckets. I know what my number one priority is in my faith, my number one priority with family and friends, with fun, with fitness and finance. I've set that number one priority. Everything else that I do, I want to feed into that. So number one, who do I want to become? Second question, who am I now that doesn't match with who I want to become? What characteristics, what thoughts and feelings am I having? What are those things that are part of me now? What is not matching with who I want to become? And then third question, what actions would I need to take in order to become that person who's my goal? To become the person that will allow me to accomplish and achieve what I have set for myself for 2020. Now, 2 other great questions to ask. First one is, do I believe that it's possible? You've got your goal. You know who you want to be, who you want and need to become to achieve that goal. Do you believe that it's possible? If you have the thoughts and feelings, and if you take the actions, do you believe it's possible? And the second part of that question is, do you believe it's probable? Now, those are 2 very important things. Possible means you look around and you think, absolutely, it is possible that I could do this. You may set a big, huge, lofty goal, and I recommend that you do. Is it possible to achieve it? You can look around in your particular niche or whatever it is that you're working toward and say, has anybody else ever accomplished this? And if the answer is yes, then you know that it's possible. Now, that second question, is it probable? That means you're looking inward to yourself to say, do I believe that it's probable for me to achieve this? You don't have to absolutely believe that it's probable for you to accomplish that goal in order to pursue it. If you know it's possible and you answer the first question, who do I need to become to achieve that goal? And you answer the question, what now about me doesn't match that person? And what are the actions that I need to be taking? Then you can set yourself up for higher possibility and higher probability. And then when you ask yourself, am I willing to commit to those thoughts, feelings, and actions that will be required for me to become that person? That commitment is what's going to take you closer and closer to making it probable for you. Because for most people, really and truly, and I've experienced this, it's clarity, commitment, and consistency. The 3 C's. It's clarity, which is being clear on what it is you're doing, where you're going, who you need to become, what your goals are, etc. It's the commitment to those, and then the consistency to the action steps that are required to do that. That's what not only makes it probable or possible, but also makes it probable for you, which is important. So another question to answer in achieving those goals, and again, this is in any area, not just business, not just finance, but in anything. Who do I serve and how do I serve them? Who do I serve is your ideal client. Or if you're working on a relationship, it could be that person in the relationship. And how do I want to serve them? How do I best serve them? Those are two other questions that you want to answer. So who do I serve and how do I serve them? And then some other important things for you to answer for yourself is kind of like the life is 50-50. Life's going to come along and that negative 50% is going to happen and we all make mistakes. How do you handle mistakes that you've made in your life, in your business, whatever area you're working on? How do you deal with and handle those mistakes? How do you learn from those mistakes? That's an important part of it. Mistakes are inevitable for all of us. It's kind of like testing. I look back now and I think, gosh, when we're so focused on not flunking a test, sometimes we forget that the goal of a test is to help us not only know what our strengths are, but also identify those weaknesses so that we can improve on those. So how do you handle mistakes? How do you give yourself grace to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes? And then the next question, what steps do I need to be taking today to become that person, to take those action steps, to raise that possibility and probability of achieving my goals? And then a final question to answer, especially when we only have a limited amount of time and we have 5 areas or however many that we're focused on creating the goal of accomplishment. I'm just kind of playing on my own focus words and you'll know what yours are and how to plug those in. But how do I decide what to say yes to? And how do I decide what to say no to? And one of the ways that I answer that is this moving me closer to my goal or taking me further away from my goal? So I would love to hear any thoughts that you have. You can post them in the comments below. This will be uploaded to my podcast. It will be uploaded to YouTube and it will be on my blog at streetsmartwealth.com as well. So you can find it there. But I would love to hear your comments. I'm still very interested in knowing your focus word for 2020. I'd love to know what you've learned from the process of closing out not only 2019, but closing out this decade, this last 10 years, and what you're really looking forward to in this new decade, this new year, this new exciting year of 2020. All right, so that's what I have. I appreciate you so much for watching, for commenting, for sharing, and I look forward to seeing you next week where we begin to talk about clarity and my themes. As I mentioned, I have set up my themes for 2020. Each month has a theme, and through that theme, it helps me develop my marketing calendar and create content and create value and all of that. And so I'm really focused on those 3 C's specifically regarding January, which is clarity, commitment, and consistency. All right, everybody, make it a great day. I appreciate you being here. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. And I look for great things in 2020, not only from myself, but from all of you too. Have an awesome one. Take care.